Sophia had dreamed about her wedding day since she was a little girl. She had imagined white flowers, soft music, and a day where everything felt perfect. When that day finally came, it looked almost exactly like her dream. The sun was shining gently through the windows of the old church. Candles burned slowly along the aisles. The air smelled like roses and warm summer air. Everyone was smiling, whispering softly, and waiting for the ceremony to begin. She stood in front of a mirror in the small bridal room at the back of the church. Her hands trembled as she touched the lace on her dress. It was white and delicate, just like she had imagined. Her makeup was soft, her hair neatly tied back with a small silver clip. When she looked at herself, she didn't just see a bride. She saw a woman who had made a choice, a safe choice. The man waiting at the altar, Daniel, was kind and calm. He wasn't exciting or dangerous, but he loved her in a quiet, steady way. He was the kind of man her family wanted her to marry. A man who would give her a house, children, and peaceful days. She had convinced herself that this was enough, that love didn't need to be wild to be real. The bridesmaids entered one by one, smiling at her, fixing little details on her dress, whispering how beautiful she looked. Her best friend gave her a small hug and said, "This is it, Soph, your new beginning." She smiled back, but deep down, her chest felt heavy. She told herself it was just nerves. Everyone feels nervous before a wedding. Outside the small room, she could hear the guests arriving. Laughter echoed down the hallway. Soft piano music floated through the air. Everything was happening exactly the way it was planned. But Sophia kept glancing at the door as if she was expecting something. She told herself she wasn't. She told herself she had moved on from her past, from him. But the small, uneasy feeling in her stomach wouldn't leave. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. For years, she had worked hard to build a new life. She had walked away from dangerous people and dangerous feelings. She had promised herself never to look back. Daniel represented everything safe. No surprises. No pain, no storms. That was what she wanted now. Wasn't it? A knock came on the door. Her father entered, smiling, his eyes soft with pride. "You look beautiful," he whispered. His voice almost broke, just like your mother did on her wedding day. Sophia smiled, though her throat felt tight. Her father offered his arm, and she took it. As they walked down the hallway toward the church doors, she heard the music grow louder. The guests quieted down. The world narrowed to the red carpet, the altar, and the man waiting for her at the end of it. When the doors opened, everyone turned. Sophia stepped into the light. People gasped softly, not because of the dress, but because she looked calm, almost too calm. She moved slowly, step by step, her heart beating louder with each one. She focused on Daniel's face. He smiled nervously, like a man who knew he'd won something precious. Her father squeezed her arm. "This is your moment," he whispered. She smiled back. She wanted to believe him, but the uneasy feeling grew stronger. It wasn't cold feet. It wasn't fear. It was something else, a whisper from the past she had tried to silence. As she stood before Daniel, she thought about how simple life could be from this moment on. No danger, no shadows, just quiet love and routine. But somewhere deep inside her heart, she felt a small ache, not for safety, but for something she couldn't name. The priest began to speak. The words blurred together. Sophia's hands felt cold. She looked at Daniel, but her mind began to drift. For a moment, she imagined another pair of eyes, dark, sharp, unforgettable. Eyes she once swore she'd never see again. She blinked hard, trying to shake the thought away. That part of her life was gone. It had to be gone. The guests smiled, unaware of the storm quietly growing inside the bride. Daniel held her hands gently. The music continued. The candles flickered. Everything around her looked perfect, but Sophia felt like she was standing on the edge of something she couldn't see. She told herself again, "This is my future. This is right." But deep down, another voice whispered back, "Not yet." The moment felt strangely still, like the world was holding its breath. She didn't know it yet, but the man from her past was already on his way. In just a few minutes, the doors of the church would open again, and everything she thought was safe and sure would change forever. Sophia didn't notice the black car at first. It slid quietly through the narrow street like it belonged to the shadows. The sky outside the church was beginning to turn cloudy. A soft wind picked up, moving the ribbons and flowers tied to the gates. Guests inside were laughing and taking their seats, but outside, the air was different, quieter, heavier. The man inside the car sat perfectly still. His hands rested calmly on his knees, but his eyes were locked on the big wooden doors at the front of the church. He had been here before, not to this church, but to moments like this. Moments when everything changed with a single step. Sophia, still standing near the altar, felt it before she saw it. A strange chill crept up her arms, like someone had walked over her grave. It made no sense. Everything around her was warm and full of celebration, but something was wrong. Her heart skipped a beat. Inside the car, Alessandro Moretti adjusted the cuffs of his black tailored suit. Years had passed, but he hadn't forgotten her. Not the way she looked, not the sound of her laugh, not the day she walked away. She had chosen a safe world, a world without him. But he had never accepted that choice. And today he had decided to remind her. The car door opened and Alessandro stepped out. His black shoes hit the stone ground without a sound. The wind seemed to grow colder around him. He didn't hurry. He never did. He moved with the slow, deliberate confidence of a man who knew exactly what he was capable of. No one at the front of the church noticed him at first. Just a figure in a black suit walking toward the door. But the doorman felt it. He froze when Alessandro passed him, his mouth dry, his voice caught in his throat. No one needed to say his name. His presence was enough. Inside, the priest was still speaking. Daniel's hands held Sophia's tightly, but she wasn't fully listening. The strange feeling inside her grew stronger, like her heart already knew who was coming. She turned her head slightly, just a little, toward the doors at the back of the church. Her best friend, standing at the side of the aisle, noticed the change in her face. "Sophia?" she whispered softly, but Sophia didn't answer. The doors of the church creaked as Alessandro pushed them open. He didn't wait for anyone to announce him. He simply entered. The warm air inside clashed with the cold wind outside, and the candles near the door flickered like they were afraid. Every head slowly turned. The music faltered. Conversation stopped. Alessandro stood in the doorway, tall, calm, dangerous in a way that didn't need words. His dark hair was slicked back, his sharp jawline clean, his eyes locked straight ahead. There was no smile, no apology, just a silent promise written in the way he looked at Sophia. Sophia's breath caught. For a moment, she couldn't move. It was like time folded in on itself, pulling her back years. The taste of his name, the sound of his voice, the warmth of nights she had forced herself to forget. Everything came rushing back at once. Daniel's fingers tightened around hers. "Who is that?" he whispered, though he already felt the danger in the air. Sophia didn't answer. She couldn't. Her heart was beating too fast. It wasn't just fear. It wasn't even shock. It was recognition. She had thought she'd never see Alessandro again. She had built her life on that promise. But there he was, standing at the door of her wedding like the ending to a story she thought was already written. His men appeared behind him, silent, suited, watching the room carefully. They didn't touch anyone. They didn't need to. Just their presence was enough to make everyone uneasy. Alessandro took one slow step forward, then another. Every guest could feel the weight of his arrival. Sophia's father stood up, confusion on his face. Daniel let go of her hand, his body tense, ready to protect her even though he didn't fully understand who this man was. But Alessandro's eyes never left Sophia, not once. In that single moment, the safe world she had built around herself began to crack. She could feel it in her chest. She could feel it in the way her knees trembled. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't a memory. This was real. And deep down, she already knew nothing in her life would ever be the same again. The church was quiet again, but it didn't feel peaceful anymore. The moment Alessandro entered, everything changed. The warm, safe air that had wrapped around Sophia only minutes earlier felt like it had cracked open. The music had stopped. The whispers were growing. She stood at the altar, her fingers cold, her heart beating like a drum she couldn't control. Alessandro walked down the aisle slowly, like a man who knew exactly how much power he carried with each step. No one tried to stop him. His black shoes clicked softly on the floor, echoing through the silent church. Guests leaned closer, whispering his name without even realizing it. There was something about him, the way he held himself, the way his eyes never left hers, that made the entire room shrink down to nothing but that aisle. Sophia felt her stomach tighten. It was like every memory she'd locked away was forcing its way back. She remembered his voice, low and smooth. She remembered the nights when he'd held her close, whispering promises she didn't know whether to believe. She remembered why she left, the fear, the danger, the darkness. But she also remembered the fire. Daniel stood frozen beside her, his hand slowly growing into a fist. He didn't know this man, but he didn't need to. He could feel it. This was someone who didn't ask for permission. Alessandro stopped halfway down the aisle. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His stare was sharp and steady, pulling her back to a world she thought she'd escaped. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. She told herself not to move, not to let him get to her. But she couldn't look away. A wave of tension ran through the room. Her father stood up, his face pale and confused. Her best friend bit her lip, unsure whether to run or stay. Daniel finally whispered, "Sophia? Who is he?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her heart was too loud in her ears. Alessandro finally took another step, his voice cutting through the whispers like a knife. "I'm here for her." The room erupted into shocked gasps. Daniel stiffened. Her father took a step forward. The priest froze in place, unsure what to do. But Alessandro's men were already at the door, silent, watching, not threatening, but making it clear this was not a joke. Daniel tried to step in front of her, but Alessandro's eyes narrowed slightly. Just that look was enough to make Daniel pause for half a second. It wasn't fear. It was instinct, the way prey knows when it's standing in front of a predator. Sophia's throat tightened. She wanted to shout at Alessandro to leave. She wanted to tell him that he had no right to be here. But the truth was more complicated. Deep down, in the part of her heart she hated to admit still existed, she had always known this day might not be as simple as she'd planned. Alessandro reached the front of the aisle. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with something she knew all too well: possession, anger, and something she couldn't name. Daniel finally spoke, his voice sharp. "You can't just walk in here." Alessandro tilted his head slightly, like a wolf amused by a smaller animal barking. "I just did." Sophia took a step back, her heart pounding. She felt everyone's eyes on her. The guests weren't sure whether they were witnessing a love story or the start of a disaster. Alessandro's voice softened, but only for her. Sophia. Her name sounded different coming from him. It always had. Like a secret, like a promise. Daniel's hand brushed her arm. Sophia, don't listen to him. Stay with me. But her body wasn't listening to Daniel. Her body remembered Alessandro, remembered how it felt to be near him. She hated that a single look could make her world spin this way. The priest cleared his throat awkwardly. Should I? No, Alessandro said sharply. She decided. The church went silent again. Sophia stared at him, trembling. He had no right to do this. But he had always been like this, walking into places where he wasn't supposed to, taking space that didn't belong to him. And somehow, it always worked. Her heart and her mind were fighting each other. Her mind said Daniel is safe. Her mind said this wedding is your new life. But her heart whispered he's here. And the part of her that had once loved Alessandro was awake again. Daniel whispered her name softly, trying to pull her back to him. But Alessandra's voice was louder in her memory than Daniel's was in her ear. The world around her blurred, the flowers, the candles, the whispers. All she saw was Alessandro, standing there like he had always known this moment would come. And maybe deep down, so had she. The church was no longer a place of celebration. It felt like the center of a storm that no one had prepared for. All the flowers, the music, the smiling faces, everything that was meant to make this day perfect, had frozen the second Alessandro walked in. His presence had taken over the room like a wave and nothing could stop it. Sophia's chest felt tight. She could barely breathe as she watched him standing only a few feet away. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He just stood there, calm and powerful, like a man who already knew the ending of the story. Daniel moved to block him, but Alessandro didn't even blink. His hands were relaxed at his sides, but the way he stood made it clear. If anyone tried to stop him, it wouldn't end well. Sophia, Alessandro said again. Her name fell from his lips like a promise she never asked for. The sound of it pulled her back years, to a time when she had been young and foolish enough to believe love could conquer danger. Daniel raised his voice now. You need to leave. This isn't your place. Alessandro tilted his head slightly, his dark eyes sharp. It's exactly my place. I'm here for her. Gasps spread through the crowd. A few guests stood, unsure whether to stay or go. Her father's face had gone pale. The priest looked frozen, clutching his book like it might save him. But Sophia didn't hear any of them clearly. All she could hear was her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She had spent so many years telling herself that she was over him, that Alessandro was her past, a dangerous, unforgettable past, but still the past. She had trained her heart to stop reacting at the thought of him. But now that he was standing in front of her, she knew she'd only been pretending. Her fingers trembled as she looked at Daniel. He looked angry, confused, protective. She had promised him a safe, quiet life. She had promised herself the same. But how could she explain to him what Alessandro meant to her without sounding like a fool? How could she explain the kind of love that burns like a fire you can't put out? Her father stepped forward, trying to sound calm. Sir, this is my daughter's wedding. Whatever this is, it's not the place. Alessandro's eyes didn't leave Sophia. She hasn't chosen yet. The room went silent again. Daniel snapped. She already did. Sophia flinched. She felt everyone waiting for her to speak, waiting for her to take someone's side. But she couldn't, because the truth was, she didn't know what side she was on. The man she was about to marry represented everything safe and predictable. A calm life, no danger, no fear. Alessandro represented the opposite, wildness, passion, danger, and a love that had never really died. Her knees felt weak. She wanted to scream at him for coming. She wanted to tell him to turn around and leave her alone. But part of her, a part she had spent years burying, didn't want him to. Alessandro took a step closer. Daniel tensed, but Alessandro stopped before reaching them. He didn't touch her. He didn't have to. His voice dropped lower, softer, meant only for her. Tell me this isn't what you want. Look me in the eye and say it. She froze. Her mouth opened, but the words wouldn't come out. Alessandro gave a faint, almost broken smile. I'll leave if you say it. Just once. If you tell me this life, this man, is what you truly want, I'll disappear forever. It was a simple offer, but it felt like the heaviest choice of her life. Sophia looked at Daniel. His eyes begged her to speak, to choose him, to choose the safe life they had built together. Then she looked at Alessandro. His eyes didn't beg. They burned. The storm outside had started, rain hitting the stained glass windows of the church like tiny hands. It sounded like the world itself was holding its breath. Her heart raced as if it already knew the truth, but she was still afraid to say it out loud. Alessandro's voice dropped even lower. Say it, Sophia. And for the first time in years, she couldn't lie to herself anymore. Sophia stood frozen. Alessandro's words hung in the air like smoke. Say it. If you want this life, I'll walk away. The entire church felt silent, as if the walls themselves were listening. The sound of rain tapping against the stained glass windows filled the room. Everyone was waiting for her next move, the priest, her father, the guests, Daniel, and Alessandro. Her throat felt tight, but it wasn't fear this time. It was the weight of years. Years of trying to build a quiet life. Years of convincing herself that the safest choice was the best one. Years of pretending the part of her that once belonged to Alessandro had truly disappeared. She looked at Daniel. He was breathing hard, but his face was full of hope. His hand reached toward hers again, as if he could pull her back into the life they planned together. A house, a calm routine, a world with no surprises. He had loved her gently with patience and kindness. Then she looked at Alessandro. He wasn't reaching for her. He just stood there, soaked from the rain, jaw tense, eyes burning with the same fire she'd always known. He wasn't promising safety. He wasn't even promising happiness. But he was promising something real, something that had never faded. Her heart squeezed painfully. Her past and her future were standing in the same room. Tell him, Sophia, Daniel whispered, voice cracking. Tell him you love me. Sophia opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her fingers trembled as she looked down at her dress. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. But how could it be happy when her heart was screaming for something she was too afraid to admit? Her best friend took a quiet step forward, her eyes full of worry. Sophia didn't need her to speak. She could read everything in her expression. This is your moment. No one can choose this for you. A flash of lightning lit up the church, and the thunder that followed made the floor tremble slightly. It was as if the sky itself was demanding an answer. Daniel moved closer. Please, he whispered. I love you. Choose me. Alessandra's voice came next, lower, steadier. I'm not asking you to choose me, Sophia. I'm asking you not to lie to yourself. Those words cut deeper than anything else. She closed her eyes. Memories rushed in like a wave she couldn't stop. Him holding her close on dark nights. Him making her laugh when she didn't want to smile. Him promising to protect her, even from the world he belonged to. She had walked away because she was afraid of him, afraid of the world he lived in. But she had never stopped loving him. Not for a single day. Sophia's tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, almost to herself, I can't lie anymore. Daniel froze. The quiet sound of those 5 words was louder than any scream. She took a step forward, away from the altar, away from Daniel, away from everything she had built on top of a lie. The guests gasped. Some whispered her name. Her father called out softly, confused and hurt. But she didn't stop walking. Alessandra's jaw tightened as he watched her approach. His hands clenched slightly at his sides, but his face stayed calm. It wasn't triumph in his eyes. It was relief. A deep, raw kind of relief. When she finally stood in front of him, the storm outside grew louder, almost as if the world itself had been waiting for this moment. She looked up at him. Her voice shook, but it was honest. "You shouldn't have come." He tilted his head, a shadow of a smile touching his lips. "You would have hated me if I didn't." She let out a shaky breath. She didn't say I love you. She didn't need to. The way she stood there, soaked in tears and rain, was enough. Behind them, Daniel's heart broke silently. He didn't shout. He didn't fight. He just lowered his head as the priest slowly closed his book. The wedding was over. But something else had just begun. Alessandro reached for her hand, slow, careful, giving her one last chance to pull away. But she didn't, and in that moment under the storm, surrounded by the shocked whispers of everyone she knew, Sophia made her choice. Not for safety, not for logic, but for the truth she had been running from all along. The doors of the church remained open. Rain blew in through the entryway. The ceremony that was meant to bind her to one man had instead led her back to another. And deep down, Sophia knew this was only the beginning of a story that would change everything. The rain had stopped, but the world around Sophia felt louder than ever. After walking out of the ceremony with Alessandro, the weight of her choice settled in. She stood outside the church, still in her wedding dress, her heart racing and hands trembling. Everything she thought she knew about her future had just been rewritten in the space of a single moment. Behind them, inside the church, guests were still whispering, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Daniel was somewhere in there too, standing alone at the altar, broken and silent. It hurt Sophia to know she had hurt someone who had never done anything but love her kindly. But the truth was no longer something she could hide behind. Alessandro stood a few steps away, his suit slightly damp from the rain, his sharp jaw tense. He wasn't smiling, not celebrating. He just looked at her, not like a man who had won, but like a man who had been holding his breath for years and could finally exhale. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered again, her voice shaky. He tilted his head slightly. "And if I didn't, would you have lived a lie for the rest of your life?" Her chest tightened. "You don't know that." "Yes," he said softly, taking a step closer. "I do." For a moment, they just stood there, the world shrinking down to the quiet street outside the church. It wasn't romantic in the traditional way. There were no smiles, no music. There was tension, pain, and something too powerful to name. Sophia felt the weight of everything pressing on her shoulders, her family's expectations, the broken heart she left behind, the danger that came with him. Alessandro wasn't safe. He never had been. His world was full of shadows, enemies, and choices that could destroy everything. And yet, standing in front of him now, she couldn't walk away. "Not this time." "I don't know if I can live in your world," she admitted. He stepped closer until he was just inches away. "You were never meant to live in anyone's world but your own. But don't pretend your heart isn't already here, Sophia. It always was." His voice was calm, but it hit her like a storm. She hated that he was right. She hated that even after all these years, her heart still knew the sound of his voice like it was made for it. Her father came out of the church then, his face pale and tired. "Sophia," he said softly, "you can still come back inside. It doesn't have to end like this." Her chest tightened even more. She could still turn around. She could still pretend none of this happened, walk back down that aisle, and live the life she had promised everyone. But it wouldn't be real. It would be quiet, safe, and completely wrong. Alessandro didn't say a word to her father. He simply looked at her, letting her decide. That was what he had always done in his own way, never asking her to be someone she wasn't. Tears burned in her eyes as she shook her head gently. I can't go back. Her father's expression fell, pain flooding his features, but he nodded slowly. He understood, even if it broke him. Alessandro reached out his hand, not forcing her, not demanding, just offering. Come with me. Sophia looked at his hand for a long time. Then she took a deep breath and placed her trembling fingers in his. The second their hands touched, it was like the world exhaled with them. It wasn't the ending anyone had expected, but it was the beginning of something that had been waiting for years. As they walked toward his black car parked at the end of the street, the wind carried the faint sound of the church bells. It wasn't a wedding anymore. It was something else, something raw and dangerous. Sophia didn't know what the future would look like, but for the first time in a long time, it felt real. The black car cut through the quiet streets like a shadow. The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle, but the night air was still cold. Inside the car, Sophia sat in silence. Her white wedding dress was slightly damp, the edges catching raindrops from when they'd stepped outside the church. The world she had known a few hours ago had disappeared behind them. Alessandro sat beside her, calm as always. His hands rested on his knees, his eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. He didn't speak, and he didn't need to. His silence was heavier than words. Sophia could feel the weight of everything she had just left behind, her father's broken face, Daniel standing alone at the altar, the whispers of the guests. It was a storm she created with a single choice. But what surprised her most was that she didn't regret it. Not yet, not even a little. Are you cold? Alessandro finally asked, his voice low. Sophia shook her head. No, he didn't press further. He reached over anyway, without looking at her, and gently placed his black jacket over her shoulders. She pulled it tighter around herself, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather, smoke, something dark and warm at the same time. It was dangerous, like him, and yet it made her feel safe in a way nothing else did. They drove through streets she didn't recognize until they finally turned into a private road, lined with tall trees on either side. At the end stood a large villa, glowing softly with warm lights against the night. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet, private, powerful. This is your house, Sophia whispered. He nodded. It's one of them. She turned to look at him. Why bring me here? Because the moment I walked into that church, he said, turning to meet her gaze, there was no going back. Her chest tightened. He didn't say it like a romantic line. He said it like a fact, a truth carved into stone. The car stopped in front of the villa. One of Alessandro's men opened the door, nodding slightly. No one spoke to her, but they all moved with quiet precision, like soldiers trained to obey him without question. She realized once again just how much power he held in his world. It scared her, but it also pulled her in. Inside, the house was warm and elegant, cream-colored walls, soft lighting, tall windows. It was nothing like she imagined a Mafia boss's home would be. There were no gold statues or wild parties. Just stillness, strength. Sophia stood in the middle of the hallway, dripping slightly from the rain, clutching his jacket around her. This doesn't feel real, she whispered. Alessandro walked toward her slowly, stopping just in front of her. It's very real, and it's going to get harder from here. She looked up at him. Then why did you come for me? His jaw clenched slightly. Because I've spent years pretending I didn't want you back. And I was done pretending. Her heart thudded painfully against her chest. She had waited years for answers she was too afraid to ask, and now they were coming quietly, one by one. He lifted a hand, slowly, carefully, giving her time to move away. She didn't. His fingers brushed against her damp hair, pushing it away from her face. "You have no idea how many times I've stood outside your world," he said softly. "But today I decided to walk in." Sophia's breath trembled. "You can't just walk into people's lives like that." "Yes," he whispered, his eyes dark and warm at the same time. "I can. I just did." She let out a shaky laugh, even though nothing about this was funny. The air between them was thick with everything they hadn't said for years. "Alessandro," she whispered, "I don't know if I can live in your world." He stepped closer until there was almost no space left between them. "Then don't live in it," he murmured. "Live with me." Her heart stopped for half a second. No one had ever said something like that to her. Not like this. Not with this weight. Outside, the rain began to fall again, softly, like the world was listening. Inside, the silence stretched, warm and dangerous. She didn't answer him with words. She simply took a deep breath and didn't step back. And for Alessandro Moretti, that was enough. The rain had softened to a quiet rhythm against the villa's tall windows, like the world was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. The night was dark, but inside Alessandro's house, the lights were low and warm. It felt nothing like the chaos that had unfolded only hours earlier. The church, the guests, Daniel, her family, it all felt far away now. Sophia stood near one of the large windows, Alessandro's black jacket still wrapped around her shoulders. Her wedding dress was slightly wrinkled, her hair damp from the rain, but she didn't care. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't pretending to be calm. She wasn't forcing herself to smile. She was just breathing. Behind her, Alessandro leaned against the wall with his hands in his pockets, quietly watching her. He wasn't smiling, but there was a softness in his eyes that very few people ever saw. He didn't need to speak. His presence filled the room like a shadow that had finally found where it belonged. Sophia glanced at him over her shoulder. "I should be terrified right now," she said softly. His voice was low. "Are you?" She turned to face him fully, the soft light touching her face. "A little," she admitted, "but not of you." That caught him off guard. His brow furrowed slightly. "Then what are you afraid of?" She swallowed. "Of how easy it still is to feel something for you. After everything. After all the years I spent trying to forget you." Alessandro pushed himself away from the wall and walked toward her, slow and deliberate. His shoes made no sound on the polished floor. "You never really forgot me, Sophia," he said quietly. "You buried it. That's not the same." She let out a shaky breath. "You always talk like you already know what's inside me." He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Because I've never stopped knowing you," he whispered. The world outside disappeared. All the noise, the expectations, the safe choices she had built her life on, they faded away. All that remained was him. "I ruined everything," she said suddenly, her voice cracking. "Daniel, my family. They'll never forgive me." Alessandro didn't look away. "Then let them hate me instead." Her throat tightened. "Why would you do that?" "Because I've done worse things than taking you back," he murmured. "If they need a villain, I'll be it. But you don't get to spend another day living a life that isn't yours." Her eyes filled with tears. It wasn't a line meant to impress her. It was something only he could say, in the only way he could. For a long time, they just stood there in silence. His hand hovered near hers, not grabbing, not forcing, just waiting. And for once, she didn't run from the weight of what she felt. She took his hand, her fingers cold, his warm. He drew her a little closer, their foreheads almost touching. The soft sound of rain wrapped around them like a quiet promise. "You're not walking into something easy," he said. "You know who I am." what I am. If you stay, I won't give you safety, but I will give you truth. I will give you everything I have. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment. Her heart wasn't steady, it was racing, but it was real. For the first time, she wasn't trying to make a choice that looked right to everyone else. She was choosing what her heart had always wanted. She whispered that I'm not going anywhere. Alessandro exhaled, a sound like someone who had been holding in a breath for years. His hand slid gently to the sides of her face, holding her as if she was something he couldn't afford to lose again. He didn't kiss her like a fairy tale. He kissed her like someone who had waited too long. The kind of kiss that burned, that claimed, but said, "This is ours." Outside, thunder rolled far away in the distance, but inside it was quiet, peaceful, even in the storm. Sophia knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be whispers, danger, people who wouldn't understand. But this time, she wasn't running from the storm. She was standing right in the middle of it with him. And for the first time in her life, she felt free,